ever-sensitive brigade of the permanently offended is now upset at the critically acclaimed movie, The Whale, starring the beloved Brendan Fraser. Multiple woke outlets and journalists just can't watch anything without being offended. It seems that in today's society, many people are quick to take offense at the smallest things.
I feel like I do. Precious?
No, that's not.
I don't know her.
That is Lizzo.
She is precious, though. Lizzo's precious.
That's like what I call her.
Lizzo is precious.
Precious to me.
Yes. No, Lizzo is precious.
Don't nobody want you, don't nobody need you. School ain't gonna help none. Take your ass down to the welfare.
I'm minding my fat, black, beautiful business.
This video is brought to you by my streaming service, Nebula. And trigger warning, this story contains themes of body shaming, disordered eating, and anti-fatness. I never thought it would happen to me. You see, I was the happiest kid. Mommy and daddy only kid. Which you would probably scoff at and subsequently call me spoiled, but the thing is, I'd agree. I never wanted, nor desired. Everything felt in reach, especially food. More, seconds, extra, double, triple. Nothing was ever enough.
I'm an obesity physician, talk to patients and hear like, it's really hard for me not to eat these things. And some people are like, just put the fork down. It's like, yeah, just don't scratch that itch that's on your back that's just going all day.
My mommy always joked that if I had a sibling, I probably ate them in the womb. My daddy would always sneer and say that it's easier to clothe me than to feed me. But what they didn't know was that food was my friend when I had none. Ramen noodles would distract me from the shouting matches in my parents' room before they divorced. But food would soon turn from friend to foe, and would turn from a distraction to everything.
I was like put in a fat camp as a child when like between the ages of me being 8 going into 9, 9 going into 10, I lost a third of my body weight as a child. I was barely old enough to live and develop body weight.
You see, I never neglected nurture from neither of my parents. And this divorce was an opportunity for my new family. You see, I spent a lot more time with my Grammy and my Nana. They would be Switzerland. You know, they'd be like a neutral place that I get dropped off to and picked up from. But they would also be the matrix for my fatness. You see, while I was lime wiring shoo-shoo albums and I watched Kubrick movies unchecked, I also had free range of the fridge. It wasn't long till mommy and daddy noticed that I was gaining a lot of weight. And even in less length was the exhorts for me to be more healthy, with grim reminders of my mortality. The reminders that diabetes and heart disease didn't just run in my family. It sprinted, marathoned, and expedited much of my family members to the finish line of life. But the greatest deterrent from my fatness was the acceptance of my peers, the pride of my parents. I felt their shame every time they dropped me off to school. I saw the simpers of my classmates when I began to burst at the seams of my clothes. I became obsessed with losing weight. I tried everything from counting calories to working out obsessively. I was drinking my ma's Slim Fast and joining her for early morning jogs at the age of 5. I even went vegetarian. Nothing worked. In fact, I got fatter.
I have lost 150 pounds before. It stops and then it comes back because you go back to your set point. There's a small minority of people who will find a new set point at a smaller size. There's also people who will basically live their whole life with an eating disorder and maintain the size because like that becomes their entire life. And then there's some people who will go to a higher set point. I'm one of those people. If I hadn't dieted, I would be smaller and I would be in much better health.
The things that they try to do to get you to lose weight actively cause you to gain weight. The shame doesn't make you lose weight, it makes you gain it.
Then I discovered fighting, martial arts in fact. And that was a place that I could redeem myself, as my weight was a weapon now. My thick thighs and hammock arms were no longer liabilities. They were skill buffs that made me dangerous to my opponents. Judo, karate, boxing, and my favorite, of course, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Not only did I perform to the acclaim of my peers, but my body took shape. I was beginning to become muscular beneath this flesh, fat fit. Most importantly, I developed confidence, which was a fashion that fit my fatness in a flattering manner for once. I experienced what felt like affection for the first time, and I craved that feeling. The glint of an eye when someone passed me by, the upward inflection of a voice when people encountered me. I wanted more of it. And to me, that meant that I needed to lose more weight. Because I never saw the fat guy getting all the girls. It was always Drake Bell or Johnny Bravo, never Carl Weezer.
And I'm gonna start crying about it because it sucks. Because all you're doing is looking for love. You know, you're looking for connection to a human being. And to be a black man who loves men, trying to connect to men, and to be shut out of that because you're fat is fucking heartbreaking. Because I want that for my people, you know? Like, I want my people to be happy.
Then, I discovered intermittent fasting. It seemed like the perfect solution, because I could still eat what I wanted to, but just restrict my eating to a certain time window. I started skipping breakfast and only eating between 1 and 6. And at first, I felt great. I was losing weight, and I finally felt like I was in control of my body. But as time went on, my relationship with food became more and more complicated. I'd obsess over my fasting schedule, and I'd feel guilty if I ate anything outside of my designated eating window. I'd skip social events if they conflicted with my fasting schedule, and I'd avoid eating with friends and family. It wasn't until I started working on the video you're watching right now that I began to realize the harm I may be causing myself.
As a bisexual, I found out that I was attracted to men by being attracted to bigger men. But at the same time, I look at myself and was like, I could go without this, personally.
You liked parts of other men that you didn't like about yourself?
Yes. I have let the American Eurocentric beauty standards affect my perception of myself for so long. For the longest time, I didn't realize that I was skinny until somebody who was 3 times bigger than me informed me verbally, physically, face to face, that I'm skinny.
I interviewed several fat folks about their experience. I felt personally called out in every interview. I realized that what I had been doing all these years was not just a diet or a lifestyle choice. It may be an eating disorder.
Mad people in the army got eating disorders and don't even know that they got eating disorders. You restrict caloric intake to lose weight. Like, if you restrict too much, then your metabolism slows down because your body goes, oh shit, I'm not getting food. I need to survive, so then it stores fat.
Essentially what it is that it's being a poor person who has no access to food, because you eat like a very small amount of food and then you go without food for a long time, between like 3 and 6 hours. And then there's like a little like refeeding period. And basically what it does is it trains your stomach to get smaller and smaller and smaller because there's nothing in it. When my stomach got smaller because I didn't eat for a full day, I was sick.
We're so used to eating disorders looking a particular way that I never suspected it to look like this, to be something as seemingly benign as fasting. But my struggle with fatness is a microcosm of something far greater, far more insidious, and that is the rhyming of fat and black. I say rhyme not only because, well, it's true, But because there's a unique and notable history surrounding the intersection of fatness and blackness as experiences.
Not only is anti-fatness part of like anti-blackness, but anti-fatness is anti-blackness, which is to say that if you are anti-black, you're also anti-fat, and if you are anti-fat, you are also anti-black.
Now, put down your pitchforks. I would be remiss to be reticent towards the universal and pernicious nature of anti-blackness that permeates every crevice of our existence. But while fatness is not the same as blackness, while fatness is not synonymous with blackness, it does rhyme for a reason. With that disclaimer out the way, I want to investigate the dissonance that despite being black, and despite having black people like Jesse Owens being touted for their innate athletic abilities by white supremacist scholars transforming into what we now see as Rogan marveling blackness today.
He is one of the most impressive physical specimens I've ever been in front of. He doesn't look like a real person. Jacked. Yoel Romero's jacked.
Shit. How that very observation can come out the razor-thin lips of white supremacists and then be followed by remarks of black people being fat and lazy as well as obtuse. Ergo, the reason for our dependency on the state, as well as the supplication to the oppression of colonialism. I want to plumb the depths of the erroneous race science that allows for white revisionist historians to depict blackness as fat and indolent, despite blackness being the buttress that built the United States on our backs. I want to inquest into how fat went black and never came back.
Just drink Coke, the road you won't be sunny. At Coke, we say we're woke. We sell drinks that has smoke. China is our labor supplier that drives our stock price even higher. What the world knows today obesity won't go away. Diabetes is here to stay. That's a real thing. What the world knows today obesity won't go away. Diabetes is here to stay. That's a real thing. Coca-Cola.
Fatness wasn't always demonized. It was once considered the apex of beauty, health, and indicated an access to upper echelons of society. Many of Brendan Fraser's fans have proclaimed that this is the Renaissance, as the beloved actor has finally made his return to both television and the big screen after his long-standing absence. While many watchers of Darren Aronofsky's The Whale took it as a character study, some activists felt that Fraser's portrayal in the psychological drama was an insulting indictment on fat people.
If you've never asked for a seatbelt extension on a plane, you don't get to decide if it's anti-fat. If you've never had to worry about this, whether a chair holds you up, if you've never held a chair break from under you, you don't get to decide if it's anti-fat. This is one of the reasons why we hate fat suits, is because it's subtly giving you the suggestion that fat is something you can just take off. I don't have a zipper on my body. I can't take it off at the end of the day. Every voice who writes about anti-fatness, everyone who's in a super fat position who talks about it has been like, this is shit. This is degrading. Either I'm not watching this or I watched this and it triggered me.
Entertainment journalist and writer Katie Rife forewarned those on Twitter, which incited a hot debate on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Reddit about the film, which film critics lauded as an award season winner. Since its release, however, watchers have criticized the movie's use of a fat suit and called it a caricature.
What did you have on? Because your hands were big on your body.
Those were like sleeves that came to the shoulder. There was a 5-point harness that had me strapped in pretty, once into it, I was in there all day until it came off. But the rule was with this is that the whole look should obey the laws of physics and gravity, because we don't see that in films. And I really looked. I looked at what the Farrelly brothers did. I looked at what Mike Myers did. I looked at what Eddie Murphy did. And that's just in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Anything before then, it's a cutout silhouette of a costume that's stuffed with like batting, and it's normally just an athletic actor inside the silhouette of a suit. And it was all in service of just, kind of a mean joke or a one-note sort of shtick that I think we're better than. There are those who live with this disease, and it was my obligation to be their voice.
Katie began her tweet with the sentence, "I can't recommend in good conscience that fat people watch The Whale," before adding that she definitely couldn't recommend that skinny people watch it either, since it reinforces the notion that fat people are objects of pity who have brought their suffering upon themselves through lack of coping skills. Others, however, responded that fatness is a medical illness and that the film accurately portrayed binge eating in a nuanced, emotional, and raw way.
Media played a big role. Fat jokes on cartoons, on sitcoms and movies. People with obesity on these movies and shows, they were always the butt of the joke. I'm an obesity physician. We need to actually have specialists as opposed to going to a general practitioner, family doctor, internist. Because what they'll say is you just got to eat less, move more, go on a diet, go exercise. They won't even look at the patient. They're like, your BMI is let's just say high, whatever it is. And they'll say, you need to lose weight. And they didn't even talk to the patient. And I hear this all the time. It's possible that the patient had already made a lot of effort to lose weight and they've already lost, it could be 100 pounds. And they might not even notice because the doctor just looks at the calculation without actually talking to the patient.
As in all debates on social media, this one devolved from a conversation about their Aronofsky's performance of fat bodies into plain old anti-fatness. But things weren't always like this. Recognition of fatness as a medical illness only antecedes to this century. And the idea of good and bad weight was about the mores and aesthetic standards of the time.
Once slavery became a thing, they learned that it was no longer in vogue to be fat or hefty because it would no longer be associated with wealth. And what it was that they noticed, hey, I'm in power. I don't want enslaved people to look like me. So I'm going to demonize fatness. And then that led to fat pathology. And then they basically started to scientifically associate fatness with sickness is what it is. And anyone within proximity of that, i.e. the working class, if you were fat or anything like that, you were considered to basically be slave coded. During that time, it started to be aspirational to be as thin as possible. All it is just white people just trying to find ways to justify them being in power.
The human body has always been the subject of stigmatization, but not in the way we think.
Fatness is seen dependent upon gender. Think about how society treats fat women versus fat men. A fat woman is undesirable, but a fat man is Rick Ross.
Prehistoric figures of women and fertility goddesses like Venus were more curvaceous and larger. From ancient Rome to the Baroque period, the most beautiful women were portrayed as being voluptuous. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Rubens, Charles Mania, and probably even Zulix illustrated women in generous form. For men, however, things were a bit different. Hippocrates took painstaking caution to separate the large size of a male athlete from that of a fat man who was weighed down by fat rather than by his own strength. Fatness itself was highlighted in male figures too, such as the Greek deity of wealth, Pluto, and most notably in Renoir's depiction of industrial barons. Plump bodies were associated with health, good social standing, and subsequently riches. During a time when food scarcity was common and famines were an expedited facet of life. But how do we get here? Well, beauty eventually represented slimness in the 20th century, where images of both men and women alike were depicted as trim and slender throughout the media. As the decades rolled by, aesthetics took a lanky form in fashion ads with models such as Donyale Luna, Twiggy, and the iconic heroine Chic brought on by Kate Moss, each of which coincide with the perception of fatness as the subject of ridicule, stigmatization, and otherness.
That supermodel, they have like a BMI of like whatever, 18 or something like that. They're on the risk of being underweight. And actually underweight, you see this huge increase in risk of mortality and death. So just being underweight can be very unhealthful. Losing their periods, low bone density, increased risk of cardiovascular disease based on kind of this ovarian, I don't want to say failure, but kind of based on not having enough body fat, breaking hips and things like that. Being underweight is actually a huge increase of mortality.
We've all heard at least one comment about why fatness is wrong in our lives, and have seen examples of bullying resulting from having a socially undesirable weight.
With me, I have to like take a step back and like make sure that first and foremost, I'm not defining preferences the same way that these racist white folks have been doing it for years. And at the same time, I also have to make sure that I keep an eye open to notice when that is being applied to me by other white folk. There is more than one queer dating/hookup app than Grindr. The ones that I mostly use were Growler, which is for people who are looking for like bears and otters and like bigger type bodies. And then there's like Bigger City for those who are like looking for bigger bodies in general.
Oh.
My first encounter back when I was like 24, 25, I just moved out on my own, just created these profiles. I was approached through the DMs in Growler by a muscular white dude who looked like he was twice my age. I wasn't feeling him. I didn't want to be rude when he messaged me, so I messaged him back, "Hey, sorry, you're not my type. I'm into bigger guys." And he messaged me back. And the way that he messaged me back was like, "How bigger?" As if I offended him. Fat phobia within the bear community as well. There's some bigger individuals who don't necessarily fit the bear definition or the otter definition or the ones with bigger bodies, and they are looked down upon as well. Fat phobia in a way that allows you to be it without saying that you are. It's like if you're part of the community, you can't be, because you are part of a community that naturally praises these body types and everything like that. But you're still very selective of who's allowed in the clubhouse.
Along with the 20th century came the medical implications of weight and its association with criminality and misbehavior, as seen in Canadian doctor William Osler's Seize Sleep and Obesity, a statistical inquiry, where he opined that obesity was the sole result of overeating and indulgence. And that's just the early 1900s. It's only been recently that obesity was dubbed a form of disease with its unique pathophysiology.
There are a lot of big, jacked bodybuilders who will be the ones that will say how obesity isn't healthy. And I'm like, my buddy... My buddy, you're not healthy. It's like, dude, you got sleep apnea because you're huge. Expectation, you're going to have all these women. And the reality is a bunch of men in my DMs.
Gout, the oldest noted type of arthritis, has had a very vivid history with depictions and writings dating from the 5th century, once called the King's Disease, due to its affiliation with alcohol and access to copious amounts of food. Gout is now understood, however, to result from uric acid metabolism rather than class. All of these things tie into why fatness is such a sensitive and nuanced topic. Unlike heart disease or diabetes, fatness is something that can be witnessed, which is why people find it so easy to use someone's size for ridicule. And even though the literature may dictate that certain diseases like gout are due to one's body rather than their weight, medical professionals still have preconceived notions about fatness that results in mixed diagnosis, harm, and indifference that prevent healing.
So there's nothing more we can do if you don't change your eating habit.
I have been working hard towards it.
But if you work harder to show on the scale, but you put on almost 50 pounds since young, right, instead of losing. And you claim that you're not eating very much? Really?
I've been through this since I was 15 years old.
If you have been through that and you know what's wrong with you, then you don't need our help.
I do need help.
Okay, do you think I'm stupid? I don't understand that when you retain water?
Send me back home. No, I'm not about to do this.
You know how much shit I read before I go to the doctor to arm myself when I'm in that room? Because if I go in there and I don't have anything to argue with this person about or argue with this person with, I might not be successful.
After a year of trying, you haven't lost anything. So at this point, it's clear you don't really want to do this.
For a little while, I had a doctor who was also fat. It was so great. She actually listened to me. I cried after the appointment. We're so inundated with messages about hating bodies that it's like your first language because it's been taught to you from childhood. People think about fat people as failed thin people. The notion that there is an acceptable default. And the idea somehow is that if we're not that we're defective.
What in the world is going on with you?
I guess I'm eating the wrong things.
You think it's funny? You have a gastric bypass.
I had a gastric bypass,
to
yes.
lose weight.
To lose weight.
And you're not losing weight.
I don't eat a third what I ate before I had that surgery.
Okay? Then
You're
we're not
asking
talking
me
about
questions
that.
that I don't understand no more than you understand.
You're playing this kind of game and you think that's okay? How in the
I
world
don't see
somebody...
how I'm playing any game. I throw up constantly. I eat what I can keep down.
That's how it works. You're not eating and you're getting...
I don't want to get malnourished either.
Do you look like you're malnourished?
Go to her.
No, we're gonna finish with you.
No, we're not finishing with me. You're making me mad.
Yeah, sit down right there.
You
sit down right over there.
No.
That doctor, despite treating those specific patients, is the tip of the iceberg everywhere. It's just like, yes, I've come in for this chronic pain. You told me to lose weight. I lost the weight, but I'm still having chronic pain. And then you actually decide to do the test and you find out that it was X, Y, and Z. So you mean to tell me that this particular problem that I've apparently had for years that wasn't linked to my size at the time could have been properly diagnosed if your first instinct wasn't to tell me to lose 50 fucking pounds? I'm so thankful for my doctor because he didn't gamify it for me. He just let me know you're in hypertension level 2. In order for us to actually proceed with this, we have to get you back in the green because the tea is only going to raise your blood pressure higher. And that's going to increase your risk of like heart attack. It's like, I'm glad he wasn't that asshole because he listened with empathy and he understood what I was going through. And that urged him to help find like a combination of blood pressure medicine that actually helped. And it was just like, This is how doctors are supposed to be.
Thankfully, with knowledge at our fingertips, things have finally progressed to where most of us have heard about anti-fatness and its harmful effects. Scholars, sociologists, and fat activists have all brought to light what fat phobia is, the many insidious ways it's been perpetuated, and how it intersects with both race, class, and gender.
When I started weight loss, I started doing it for myself. I wanted more energy. I wanted my health back. My doctor had told me that I was going to get diabetes. As I lost that weight, they don't tell you that the whole world around you changes. People on the street started stopping to say hello. People wanted to be my friend, like random people. The guys that would like reject me or like ignore me as if I was not there were now like trying to buy me drinks. It even changed my relationship with my family. They were like more excited to see me. For the first time ever, my grandma took a picture of me, and I remember that day because it made me cry. And she was like, "Oh, mi flaca, my skinny girl, like I want a picture of you." And she's never taken a picture of me, ever. I would come over to my family's house and they were like, "What do you want to eat? Like, what can I make you? Like, your favorite?" And it's so crazy because when I was way bigger, it was like, "Hey, like, stop eating or make yourself something to eat." Or I felt like I didn't matter. I was getting better job opportunities, and I don't know, it's like everything around me was perfect. That messed me up because I no longer was doing it for myself. Like, I was scared that if I gained the weight back, that everyone would hate me again. After that, after being treated different, like, you feel like, oh damn, I was hated. But with that, I tell you, I developed an eating disorder. I was scared to gain that weight back. I was trying to eat as little as possible and work out as hard as possible. It really messed me up because as soon as I started eating like regular, like trying to like introduce regular foods back into my like lifestyle, I gained it all back. I gained every single pound back.
In order to grasp how fat phobia has emerged, one has to acknowledge the intersection that fatness and blackness occupy in the demonization of black bodies. Thinness has been deeply rooted in anti-blackness, a concept so eloquently addressed in the award-winning study, Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia, by sociologist Sabrina Strings, who chronicles that the obsession with bigger figures and how fatness has been used as a tool during the Renaissance, the transatlantic slave trade, the civil rights era, and even provides a modern critique on whiteness views on bigger bodies. She poignantly notes that institutionalized fat phobia in the medical industry and the deep-seated idea of curbing fatness for public health relies on the same ideologies that race scientists use to associate it with idiocy and weak constitution. Her book guides readers from the inception of race to colonialism, medical fascination with fatness, and to the modern era with a comparison of the media's wielding of fat phobia and anti-blackness. The racial hierarchy, she argues, uses fatness as a means of othering black people and its association with black women in particular.
This is not like racism, it is racism. Anti-fatness is rooted in anti-blackness. And the reason why people are pursuing thinness is because they're pursuing proximity to whiteness. The reason why people hate fat people is because people hate black people, and appearing curvy or bigger is associated with blackness, especially black women, and that's why they're discriminated in the workplace, overly sexualized, and this has gone back for centuries and centuries. All systems of oppression, capitalism, sexism, racism, it all comes back to white supremacy, which is the foundation of the fabric of America and rules every sector and aspect of our society.
Prior to the transatlantic slave trade, white women prized plumpness above all else. As the African presence grew in Europe, they immediately clenched a tight fist, like Arthur, around what it meant to be aesthetically pleasing. Artists emphasized African subjugation by portraying black women as frail, sickly, and incredibly thin. Slavery and the New World meant new fashion, exotic fruits, and delectable sweets in the form of white gold, sugar. Its introduction into the diets of European women began to make their masculine counterparts incredibly anxious about fatness and desirability. Strings then specifies that the Enlightenment is the first time that fat is out and thin is in, with male members of the Intelligensia, William Shakespeare, Rousseau, Descartes, penning that excessive consumption equaled a lack of intelligence and morality. German princess Elizabeth Charlotte most notably described herself as having a monstrously wide waist and being square as a cube. Race then comes in around the same time. You see, remember those race scientists I mentioned? We know them as being absolutely idiotic, pseudo-intellectual dunderheads. But in the late 17th century, they were brilliant. White men like Georges-Louis Lecoq and Julien-Joseph Virey tied the sin of gluttony to the African body whose idleness from the tropics they believed made them inferior, which is pretty ironic, given that portraits of Virey show him to be a person of size himself. I digress. Virey most notably described apes as being the root of the human genus. In his proposition on human evolution, he notes that the African was merely the second step in obtaining true intelligence and humanity. It makes me sick even saying it. From the orangutan to the Hottentot bushman, to the most intelligent Negroes, and finally to the white man, he writes, one passes indeed by almost imperceptible nuances. Thin physiques then immediately moved from the sickly to the reason for the white man's inherent dominance of the earth, supported by writings by faux anthropologists and biologists who built the racial totem pole with themselves as the apex. As a result, African women of the time, with their curvy bodies and fetishized looks, are deemed grotesque and animalistic. They weren't the only ones. People of color in other regions were also given similar treatment. In her memoir, Lady Wortley Montague condemned the fleshy and sensuous figures of Turkish women to endorse their supple beauty of white European women. Books and magazines such as Harper's Bazaar and Goody's Ladies' Book in the 19th century, then in plain English, begin to reaffirm to American women that fatness equals criminality, deformity, and African savagery. So where are we now? Well, let's turn on the TV and take a look. The Biggest Loser is a reality show that rewards participants for their rapid weight loss without regard for how exactly it's done. The winner's transformation is rewarded with cash and the applause of watchers. It was so popular that at its height, People magazine would dedicate a cover to the now beautiful body of the champion. Similar to the post of people who posted or blogged about their fitness journeys, each contestant would detail how their weight held them back in certain areas of their life, and how the world immediately welcomed them with open arms after shedding these pounds. And that's the problem. Why the hell is it remotely okay that fat people have to live on the margins of society in a world that should automatically treat them as humans rather than spectacle? And why do fat people have to prostrate themselves and push their bodies to incredible, inhumane limits for an audience of millions, for people to see in order to be deemed attractive? As a matter of fact, who keeps greenlighting these shows? There's even My 600-Pound Life on TLC, the network whose approach to entertainment seems too often eager to embrace the presumption that fat people are repugnant, but yet also worthy enough for constant surveillance and a source of entertainment. It's not adding up. It seems to me that these kinds of media not only serve to demonize fat people for simply just existing, but to also tell viewers, you better not eat that next piece of cake. You better not indulge, or this will be you on television next. Fat people, to TLC, are curiosities to be probed and displayed for the satisfaction of thin folk. These are real people who are expressing their pain and challenges with their weight, which is a very real, sensitive thing, and having it been made a point of ridicule and pity. But wait, there's more. You see, even with widespread criticism and numerous write-ups on their publicization of big bodies, they did it again with their miniseries Hot and Heavy, which followed several couples composed of average or muscular men and bigger women. The entire show was framed as if their partner's fatness was a liability by preemptively positing, does love really conquer all? Really? Honestly, like, couples of different weights have always existed. Tired of this, man. Once again, the juxtaposition of the title, hot being thin and heavy being unattractive, is how they get their views. And if you haven't noticed, a lot of the opinions on fatness mentioned throughout today's videos focus on women, as the onus is nearly always femmes to prove their worth through their size. Everything I've said here is only a regurgitation of what queer, gender non-conforming, fat black activists have been shouting from the rooftops for years. While curvy body positivity is portrayed in media like the Dove commercials, which still only shows a certain kind of bigger body, mind you. Recent movements of fat activism have been dominated by white people who have only recently learned how race and anti-fatness intersect. As we continue to create a more inclusive world for all, it's important to amplify and listen to voices like Roxanne Gay, like Deshaun Harrison, like Stephanie Yeboah, who deserve all their flowers for highlighting the intersections of anti-fatness and anti-blackness. Because their work on the preoccupation of black bodies on behalf of the world is essential to understanding negrophilia. And you're wondering what negrophilia means. I have a whole video delving into the way that we fetish black bodies, which you can watch on Nebula first.
Buy the blasted streaming service so I can stop living like this. You see how white this room is? I talking about anti-blackness and this room this white. Dr. Umar about to burst through my door like the Kool-Aid man.
I can't even respond to that.
My streaming service Nebula is home to your favorite independent creators like Sam from Wendover and Johnny Harris, where you can gain access to exclusive that you will never see on YouTube and extended cuts that dive deeper into the content you already love. But most of all, you get to fight for the most marginalized alongside yours truly. Because if it wasn't for people like you supporting sponsors like Nebula, I'd be on the bread line rather than preaching the bread book. And if you sign with my link right now, listen here, you can get 40% off an annual plan that grants you access to Nebula classes. You can learn how to get paid to be a fan with none other than Nando versus movies. What are you waiting on? You waiting on the second coming of Christ? Tap the link in the description to gain access to the smartest service in streaming, Nebula. And tap there to watch more videos pertaining to anti-fatness. I can see you there. You're now watching the Nebula Cut.